Tonight, a story about a small room full of paper. It is a true story, and a very quiet one. Nothing frightening happens in it. Most of it is about people writing things down, and about a room being closed, and then, a long time later, being opened again. You do not need to follow closely, or to keep track of the names. Some of them are unfamiliar, and that is fine. Let them go past like scenery. If you fall asleep in the first few minutes, nothing is lost. The room will still be there. Settle in, and breathe out, and we will begin at the edge of a desert. In the far west of what is now Gansu province, in China, there is a town called Dunhuang. It sits at the western end of the Hashi Corridor, a long natural passage between mountains and desert, and for well over 1,000 years it was one of the most important places in Asia to stop. If you were traveling west out of China, Dunhuang was where the road divided, one branch north of the Taklamakan Desert, one branch south, and where you rested and traded and resupplied before committing yourself to whichever way you had chosen. If you were coming east, it was the first substantial town in China. Merchants, monks, soldiers, envoys, and animals in great numbers. It is an oasis, watered by snowmelt off the Chilean mountains, with poplar trees and fields, surrounded on all sides by gravel and sand. About 15 miles to the southeast there is a low cliff of soft rock facing a dry riverbed, with sand dunes rising behind it. That cliff is where this story happens, and the reason it happens there is that soft rock is easy to dig. From about the 4th century of the Common Era, monks began cutting caves into that cliff. The tradition says the first was dug by a wandering monk named Yuezuan, who saw a vision of 1,000 Buddhas in golden light on the rock face, and settled there. Others followed. Over the next 1,000 years, generation after generation, the caves multiplied until there were hundreds of them, in tiers, connected by walkways along the cliff. They were not dwellings. They were shrines. Each one was plastered smooth inside and painted, from floor to ceiling, with Buddhist scenes, and furnished with painted clay sculptures. Wealthy merchants paid for them. Local governors paid for them. Families paid for them, and had themselves painted small in the corner, in the clothes of their period. The site is called the Moguro Caves, and taken together the paintings cover something like 45,000 square meters. Because the desert is so dry, the colors survived. You can look at a wall there and see, quite clearly, what a musician's instrument looked like in the 8th century, or how a merchant tied his belt. It is one of the great picture books of the medieval world, and it is on the wall of a cliff. By 1900, all of this was in poor condition. The great days of the overland trade had ended centuries before, as sea routes took the traffic. Dunhuang had become a small remote town in an empire with other problems. The caves were half filled with drifted sand, some of the walkways had collapsed, and the paintings were blackened with the smoke of travelers who had sheltered there. A few caves were still used for worship, and living among them was a Daoist priest named Wang Yuanlu, who had been a soldier before he took up religion, and who had appointed himself caretaker of the site. He had no authority to do this and nobody objected. He was, by all accounts, an uneducated man of considerable determination. He begged for donations in the town and used the money to clear sand out of the caves and repair them, according to his own ideas of what a repair should be, which were not the ideas of a conservator. He worked at it for years, one cave at a time. In the middle of that work, in the summer of 1900, he was clearing sand from a large cave when something in a passage wall did not sound right. The exact details vary between the tellings, and Wang himself gave more than one account. In some versions a crack appeared in a plastered wall. In some, a workman noticed the wall was hollow when he tapped it. In one, the smoke of a cigarette drifted into a gap. What is agreed is that there was a small doorway in the side of the passage, bricked up and then plastered over and painted, so that it looked like part of the wall. Behind it was a room. It is not large. Roughly 3 meters each way, a side chapel, with a statue of a monk in it. And it was packed. Bundles of manuscripts, wrapped in cloth, stacked from the floor to the ceiling, filling almost the entire space. Later estimates put the number of separate items at something like 50,000. Scrolls, folded books, loose sheets, a few paintings on silk and hemp, banners, and printed sheets. They had been in there, in complete darkness, in the driest air in China, since roughly the year 1000. 900 years, undisturbed. Nothing had rotted. Nothing had been eaten. The ink was still black. Wang Yuanlu understood that this was important, though not what it was, since he could not read most of it. He took some samples to the local magistrate, and then to the provincial authorities, and asked what should be done. The response was slow and, in the end, thin. The dynasty was in serious difficulty. There had been a rebellion and a foreign occupation of the capital that same year, and the money and attention required to move 50,000 documents across 1,000 miles of desert were not available. He was eventually told to seal the cave up again and look after it. So he did, more or less, and the room stayed shut for another 7 years, while he continued raising money for his repairs. Then, in 1907, a Hungarian-born British archaeologist named Aurel Stein arrived at Dunhuang, in the course of a long survey expedition across Central Asia. He had heard rumors of the find. He spent some time gaining Wang's confidence, partly by talking about the monk Xuanzang, a 7th-century pilgrim whom both men admired, and whose route Stein was following. Wang eventually let him into the room. Stein could not read Chinese, so he worked with an assistant and made selections partly by appearance. Over several weeks he took away something like 10,000 items, in exchange for a donation of about £130 towards the repair of the caves. The following year a French sinologist named Paul Pelliot arrived. Pelliot could read Chinese fluently, and several other relevant languages, and he sat in that small room with a candle for 3 weeks, going through the bundles at a rate he later estimated at 1,000 documents a day, choosing the rarest and the strangest. There is a photograph of him doing it, crouched among the stacks by candlelight, which is the single most famous image associated with the site. Then came a Japanese expedition, and a Russian one, and finally, in 1910, the Chinese government ordered what remained brought to Beijing, and a good deal went missing on the way. The result is that the contents of one small room are now divided between London, Paris, Beijing, St. Petersburg, Kyoto, and a number of other places. What we should say about all of that, honestly, is that it was a scattering, that it was done with the paperwork of its period and the assumptions of its period, and that the arguments about it are still live and are not ours to settle tonight. So what was actually in the room? The bulk of it is Buddhist. Copies of sutras, many of them multiple copies of the same text, along with commentaries, prayers, and liturgies. That is not surprising for a monastic library. But that is far from all of it. There are texts in Tibetan, in Sanskrit, in Sogdian, which was the trade language of the Silk Road, in Khotanese, in Old Uyghur, in Tangut, in Old Turkic, and there is a small Hebrew prayer sheet. There are Manichaean texts, from a religion that has otherwise almost entirely vanished and is mostly known through what its enemies wrote about it. There are Christian texts of the Church of the East, which had communities right across Asia. All of that, in one room, in a desert town. It is the clearest surviving proof of what the Silk Road actually was. Not a road, and not really about silk. A long chain of overlapping communities, in which a great many languages and beliefs traveled together and lived alongside one another for centuries in places most histories never mention. And then there is the ordinary material, which is, to me, the best part. Somebody bundled up the everyday paperwork of the monastery and the town and put it in with the scriptures. So we have contracts, loan agreements, with the interest specified, deeds of sale for land, and for donkeys, inventories, a monastery's account of what it spent on oil and on flour, household registers, medical prescriptions, divination texts, for choosing lucky days, model letters, showing how to write politely to a superior or apologize for being drunk at a party, school exercise sheets, where a child has copied a line of text out 10 times, and got progressively worse at it down the page, which anyone who has ever done homework will recognize instantly. There are songs and popular story cycles, written down in colloquial language rather than formal literary Chinese, which is exceptionally rare for that period. There is a sheet of paper with a poem on one side and a shopping list on the other. Ordinary life, in the 9th century, in a town at the edge of a desert, written down and then left alone for 900 years. 2 things from the room have become famous. One is a star chart, drawn in ink on paper, probably from around the year 650 or a little after. It maps more than 1,300 stars, in 12 panels plus a circular polar view, using a projection that flattens the sky onto the page. It is the oldest complete star atlas known from anywhere in the world, and the positions on it are, for the most part, good. The other is a copy of the Diamond Sutra, dated to the 11th day of the 4th moon of the 9th year of the Xiantong reign, which works out as the 11th of May, 868. It is not handwritten. It is printed, from carved wooden blocks, with a fine illustration at the front, on a scroll about 5 meters long. It is the oldest dated printed book that survives anywhere, roughly 600 years before Gutenberg. And at the end of it there is a line recording who paid for it. A man named Wang Jie, who commissioned it, the text says, for free universal distribution, on behalf of his 2 parents. The oldest printed book in the world was made to be given away. The question that remains is the simplest one, and nobody has answered it. Why was the room sealed? The latest dated document in it is from the year 1002, so the bricking up happened after that, probably within a few decades. The oldest suggestion is fear. There were dangerous years around then, with the Tangut state expanding westwards, and it is easy to imagine monks hiding their library from an army that never in fact came, and then, somehow, nobody ever coming back for it. That explanation has a problem. If you are hiding treasures, you take the valuable ritual objects and the complete new scrolls. This collection contains a great many damaged, incomplete and duplicated items, and rather few of the things you would expect to rescue. So a second suggestion has gained ground. In many traditions, sacred writing cannot simply be thrown away when it wears out. It must be retired respectfully. The room may have been a repository of that kind, filled slowly over years with worn-out and superseded manuscripts, until it was full, and then closed and plastered over as a completed act. Not a hiding place. A resting place. The honest position is that we do not know, and that the evidence supports more than one story. The documents are scattered now, but they are also, slowly, being photographed and put together again online, page by page, so that a scroll in London and its missing half in Paris can sit side by side on a screen. It is patient, unglamorous work, and it is going well. If you would like something to sleep on, take the room itself. 3 paces across, dark, dry, brimful of paper, with a painted wall in front of it, and 900 quiet years going past outside. There is another story waiting whenever you want it. Good night.